In 2025, the long-simmering Israeli-Iranian conflict has erupted into open warfare. Welcome to the International Explainer, where we analyze complex world events without judgment or bias. Today's topic: Operation Rising Lion. A massive Israeli airstrike campaign targeting Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure, and Iran's unprecedented retaliation in the form of missiles and drones. With half of Iran's missile launchers destroyed and Israeli officials announcing a prolonged campaign, the stakes have never been higher. We explain. What triggered this escalation? Who the key players and international backers are? Why it could trigger a wider war? And how it affects you, from oil prices to digital misinformation. If you're ready for clear, factual analysis of international news, subscribe to the International Explainer, your go-to source for unbiased analysis of the world's most pressing issues.
Israel versus Iran. Conflict explained: why the world is holding its breath in 2025. Why the Israel-Iran conflict is at the center of global attention. Since the beginning of 2025, the world has been holding its breath. Israel and Iran, two long-standing enemies, seem closer than ever to a direct confrontation. This latent conflict, long confined to covert operations, diplomatic tensions, and indirect strikes, is turning into open warfare. This shift is not taking place on the margins of the news, but is one of its epicenters. Almost every week, the media report new incidents: missiles intercepted, bases bombed, ships attacked, militias mobilized. The entire region is under tension, and the world's major powers, from the United States to Russia and China, are involved, whether voluntarily or not. But what makes this crisis particularly worrying is its global reach. It concerns Iran's nuclear program, an international security issue. It mobilizes regional and international alliances, creating a geopolitical domino effect. It threatens global oil supplies, notably via the Strait of Hormuz. It is fueling interreligious tensions and ideological rifts across the globe. In short, this is not just another chapter in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, nor a localized duel between two states. What is being played out today between Israel and Iran could reshape the balance of the Middle East, indeed, the entire world. How a war between Israel and Iran could affect everyone, especially the youth? This is not a distant conflict reserved for experts or the military. It concerns us all. And it particularly concerns the younger generations for several reasons. Firstly, because an open confrontation between Israel and Iran could quickly degenerate into a regional war. Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, the Gulf states, all could be dragged unwillingly into the vortex. And in a globalized world, no region is truly immune to its repercussions. Secondly, because the economic consequences would be immediate: rising fuel prices, inflation on basic products, market instability, risk of recession. For young people already facing climatic, health, or economic crises, a new global shock would make the future even more uncertain. Finally, this conflict is also an information war. On social networks, teenagers are on the front line, exposed to an avalanche of violent images, contradictory accounts, and sometimes targeted disinformation. Understanding what's going on, knowing how to read between the lines, deciphering what's at stake, has become an act of digital citizenship. The aim of this dossier is twofold: explain the origins, players, and logic of this conflict, to enable everyone, young or old, to form an informed opinion, far from simplistic or propagandistic. In the next chapter, we'll go back in time to understand how, in the space of a few decades, Iran went from being Israel's strategic ally to its sworn enemy. Israel-Iran, The Hidden History of an Explosive Rivalry. How Iran Went from Ally to Enemy of Israel, 1948 to 1979. In 1948, the State of Israel was founded, and the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, adopted a pragmatic stance. Despite Iran's initial opposition to the 1947 partition of Palestine, Tehran had voted against it at the UN, in 1950 Iran became the second predominantly Muslim country, after Turkey, to officially recognize Israel. This recognition was due to shared strategic interests. The Shah, anti-communist and suspicious of Arab nationalism, saw Israel as a potential partner against the influences of Nasser's Egypt and the USSR, in line with David Ben-Gurion's doctrine of the peripheries. In the 1950s to 70s, the two countries enjoyed close diplomatic, military, and economic cooperation. Israel opened a first-rate diplomatic mission in Tehran, and Iran became its main oil supplier. Up to 40% of Israel's crude oil imports came from Iran, in exchange for Israeli weapons, technology, and agricultural products. An oil line linking Eilat to Ashkelon was even built in 1967 to carry Iranian oil to the Mediterranean. On the security front, the Savak, the Shah's feared secret police, was created in 1957 with the help of the American CIA and the Israeli Mossad. Joint projects saw the light of day, such as the Fleur program in 1977, in which Israel helped Iran develop missiles in exchange for hundreds of millions of dollars and barrels of oil. For 3 decades, this tacit alliance served the interests of both regimes, each gaining a strategic advantage: oil for Israel, arms and Western support for Iran. The fate of the Palestinians, on the other hand, was largely ignored by the Shah in favor of realpolitik. This rapprochement came to an abrupt halt in 1979. The Islamic Revolution overthrew the Shah in February of that year and brought Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini to power, establishing the Islamic Republic of Iran. The new regime immediately severed all ties with Israel. Tehran closed the Israeli mission, no longer recognized the Jewish state, and expelled the last Israelis from the country. In a highly symbolic gesture, the former Israeli embassy in Tehran was handed over to the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, to become the Palestine Embassy, while the surrounding square was renamed Palestine Square. This break was accompanied by a radical change in rhetoric. Khomeini placed the rejection of Israel at the heart of the new regime's ideology. He referred to Israel as the Little Satan, the Great Satan being the United States, and accused the country of occupying Jerusalem and committing genocide against the Palestinians. The Iranian leader denounced Zionism as an instrument of the oppressive West and set out to make the Palestinian cause a universal Islamic cause, transcending the Arab-Persian and Sunni-Shia divide. As early as 1979, Khomeini established Al-Quds, Jerusalem Day, every last Friday of Ramadan, calling on the masses each year to demonstrate in solidarity with occupied Palestine. This ideological shift transformed Iran from a discreet ally of Israel into a fierce adversary. Henceforth, the Islamic Republic poses as the champion of the struggle against the Zionist entity, while Israel loses a regional partner and sees in Iran the birth of a declared enemy. How Iran and Israel started a proxy war across the Middle East, 1980 to 2000. At the turn of the 1980s, Iranian-Israeli hostility was increasingly expressed through indirect conflicts and support for armed movements. As early as 1980, a tiny group called the Palestinian Islamic Jihad appeared in the occupied territories. Strongly inspired by the Iranian Shiite revolution, despite its Sunni base, it became the first Palestinian Islamist organization to take up arms against Israel. Tehran made it its protege and main financial backer, inaugurating a strategy of support for radical Palestinian factions. At the same time, a paradox played out during the Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 1988. Although officially enemies, Israel secretly helped the new regime's Iran by delivering weapons to counter Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Around 1,500 Israeli missiles were supplied to Iran during the Iran-Iraq conflict, an operation later revealed in the Iran-Contra affair, Iran Gate. This clandestine collaboration, motivated by the common Iraqi enemy, contrasts with the bellicose public rhetoric. But overall, in the 1980s, the nascent Iranian-Israeli confrontation took place via third-party groups. Lebanon soon became the most emblematic terrain of this proxy war. In 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon in Operation Peace in Galilee, aimed at destroying PLO bases launching attacks against northern Israel. Taking advantage of the chaos of the Lebanese civil war, Iran seized the opportunity to export its Islamic revolution to the Levant. In the summer of 1982, Ayatollah Khomeini secretly dispatched several hundred revolutionary guards, Pasdaran, to Lebanese territory with the blessing of neighboring Syria, which opened the way for them. Under the aegis of an Iranian emissary, Ali Akbar Mohtashamipour, officially ambassador to Damascus, these Iranian military advisors trained young local Shiite militiamen. The Lebanese Hezbollah, the Party of God, was born. This pro-Iranian Shiite movement, founded clandestinely in 1982, presented itself as an Islamic resistance to the Israeli occupation of Lebanon. Armed, financed, and trained by Iran, Hezbollah established itself in southern Lebanon, from where it waged a relentless guerrilla war against the Israeli army. Ambushes, rocket attacks, and suicide bombings targeted the occupying forces. Israel hit back hard, and the conflict went international. Hezbollah, and its Iranian sponsor, was accused by Tel Aviv of anti-Jewish terrorist attacks abroad, such as the massacre at the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires in 1992, 29 dead, or the attack on the AMEA Community Center in 1994, 85 dead. In Lebanon, however, Iran's strategy paid off. Despite its powerful army, Israel was bogged down by Hezbollah resistance. After 18 years of costly fighting, Tzahal finally withdrew from southern Lebanon in 2000 without having defeated the Party of God, a withdrawal perceived in the Arab world as a victory for Iran and its allies. Lebanon emerged traumatized from the years of war, but Hezbollah emerged strengthened, the only militia group authorized to keep its weapons after the civil war, with the status of victor over Israel. In the Palestinian territories, the years 1980 to 90 also saw growing Iranian influence among Islamist movements. In 1987, the First Intifada broke out, a popular Palestinian uprising against the Israeli occupation. It was against this backdrop that Hamas, acronym for Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic resistance movement, was founded. Born out of the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza, Hamas was initially independent of Iran and supported mainly by funds from the Gulf. But after the Oslo Accords of 1993 to 1995, which Iran categorically rejected, Tehran drew closer to Palestinian factions opposed to the peace process. From the early 1990s, Iran became a major financial and military supporter of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, two Sunni movements that refuse to recognize Israel. Tehran provides them with money, tens of millions of dollars a year, weapons and training via the Revolutionary Guards. In exchange, these groups intensify their armed campaign against Israel. Between 1994 and 1997, a wave of suicide attacks hit Israeli cities, targeting buses, shopping centers, and civilians. Hamas and Islamic Jihad claimed responsibility for these bloody attacks, coordinated in reaction to the events of the peace process. Intelligence evidence even points to direct Iranian involvement in certain operations. For example, a suicide attack on a bus in Gaza in April 1995, 8 dead, was explicitly authorized by the Iranian intelligence minister at the time, Ali Falahian. By supporting these violent actions, Iran is sabotaging hopes of a negotiated Israeli-Palestinian peace and positioning itself as the sponsor of the camp of refusal against Israel. These 2 decades of indirect confrontation have had a profound impact on the region. In Lebanon, the emergence of Hezbollah has permanently transformed the internal balance. This pro-Iranian Shiite militia party has become one of the country's dominant political and military forces, presenting itself as the defender of Lebanese sovereignty against Israel. Southern Lebanon, evacuated by Israel in 2000, remains under the influence of Hezbollah, which maintains a large arsenal in anticipation of any future confrontation. Syria, Lebanon's neighbor and Israel's enemy since the loss of the Golan Heights in 1967, has taken advantage of its alliance with Iran to strengthen its position. Since the 1979 revolution, Hafez el-Assad has drawn closer to Tehran, isolated as he was after the separate peace between Egypt and Israel, seeing in the Khomeinist regime a new strategic ally. In 1982, Damascus even signed a military agreement authorizing the Iranian Pasdaran to operate on its soil, making Syria the rear base for Iranian intervention in Lebanon. This Syrian-Iranian entente, based on shared hostility towards Israel, consolidated a regional axis that continues to this day. On the Palestinian side, Iran's active support for Hamas and Islamic Jihad has further militarized the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Competition between the PLO, secular and nationalist favoring a negotiated solution, and the Iranian-backed Islamists has fractured the Palestinian camp. The territories of Gaza and the West Bank became not only the theater of confrontation with Israel, but also a field of influence where Iran sought to supplant traditional Arab influences by posing as the champion of Palestine's sacred cause. Last but not least, these developments helped to reshape the balance of power in the Middle East. After 1979, Israel had to incorporate the larger-scale threat posed by revolutionary Iran into its security doctrine, even as direct hostilities with certain Arab neighbors diminished. Peace treaty with Egypt in 1979, weakening of Iraq after 1991. Conversely, by setting itself up as an adversary of Israel, Iran gained weight in the Muslim world, but also attracted the hostility of the Gulf monarchies. At the end of the 1990s, there was a discrete rapprochement between Israel and certain moderate Sunni Arab states, worried about Iran's rise to power. Jordan, for example, signed a peace agreement with Israel in 1994, and the Gulf states began to cooperate behind the scenes with the Hebrew state in the face of the Iranian threat. This trend was only to grow. Years later, it led to open alliances such as the Abraham Accords of 2020 between Israel and several Arab monarchies sharing a common animosity towards Iran. By 2000, the Iran-Israel opposition had become a structuring element in the regional geopolitical game. On the one hand, an axis of resistance was formed, bringing together Tehran, Damascus, the Lebanese Hezbollah, and armed Palestinian groups, all determined to oppose Israel and American influence. On the other, Israel is striving to forge new alliances to contain Iranian expansion and preserve its security. Born of a reversal of alliances in 1979, the Iranian-Israeli rivalry has profoundly reshaped the Middle East, fueling proxy conflicts and the arms race. More than 40 years after the Shah and Khomeini broke away, this unprecedented face-off between Israel and Iran continues to define, to a large extent, the dynamics of regional crises in the 21st century. In the next chapter, we'll discover who the real players in this conflict are: powerful states, influential leaders, feared secret services, but also armed groups, regional alliances, and support from outside. Understanding who is acting and why is essential to grasping the complexity of the face-off between Israel and Iran. Who is involved in the Israel-Iran conflict? Key players explained. Israel and Iran, governments, armies, and intelligence at war. How Israel prepares for war against Iran every day. Israel is a parliamentary democracy in the midst of an extremely unstable geopolitical environment. Its security system rests on three pillars: the government, the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, and the intelligence services, notably Mossad. At the pinnacle of power, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, currently in office, he has been intermittently since 1996, plays a central role in defining strategy towards Iran. Convinced that the Islamic Republic represents an existential threat to Israel, Netanyahu has always made the Iranian nuclear program a priority. As early as the 2000s, he was alerting the international community to Tehran's supposed intentions, not hesitating to brandish diagrams of warheads during speeches at the UN. The Israeli army, Tzahal, is considered one of the most powerful in the region. It regularly carries out targeted strikes in Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza, aimed at positions or convoys linked to Iran or its allies. At the same time, the Mossad, renowned for its clandestine operations abroad, has been credited with targeted assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists, sabotage of infrastructures, such as the explosion of the Natanz site in 2021, and even cyberattacks on sensitive installations. Israel thus positions itself as a defensive yet proactive power, not hesitating to strike preemptively at anything perceived as a direct strategic threat. Inside Iran's strategy to oppose and threaten Israel. Since 1979, Iran has been a Shiite Islamic republic, governed by a hybrid system of elected institutions and supreme religious authorities. The Supreme Guide, now Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, holds ultimate power in foreign and security policy. He leads the ideology of hostility to Israel, regularly referring to the Jewish state as a cancerous tumor to be eradicated. Iran's current president, Ebrahim Raisi, elected in 2021, applies this hard line to regional politics. An ultra-conservative magistrate, he is one of the regime's most intransigent representatives. But Iran's real armed wing is the Revolutionary Guards, Sepah-e-Pasdaran, a paramilitary force founded by Ayatollah Khomeini to protect the values of the revolution. With their own army, air force, navy, and intelligence services, they also control the Al-Quds Force, a special unit responsible for clandestine external operations, notably in support of allied armed groups in the region. The Pasdaran also run part of the Iranian economy through powerful holding companies, and are today the nerve center for the export of Iranian influence, notably through deliveries of arms, funds, and military training to Shiite militias in the region. Iran's regional proxy network versus Israel's strategic allies. What is the axis of resistance, Iran's armed network across the region? Since the 1980s, Iran has surrounded itself with a network of non-state allies, forming what Iranian strategists call the axis of resistance. This coalition is based on three pillars: the fight against Israel, opposition to Western influence, particularly American, and the defense of Shiite populations in predominantly Sunni countries. Hezbollah, Lebanon. Created in 1982 at the instigation of the Revolutionary Guards, this Shiite movement is today Iran's most powerful ally. It has an arsenal estimated at over 100,000 rockets, including some precision rockets capable of striking Israel. It is considered by Israel and several Western countries as a terrorist organization, but also as a major political player in Lebanon. Hamas, Gaza. Although Sunni, Hamas has had strategic links with Iran since the 1990s. Iran regularly supplies it with missiles, funds, and technological assistance. Support has been stepped up in recent years, notably during the clashes of May 2021 and October 2023. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, even closer to Iran than Hamas, this organization operates mainly from Gaza, regularly firing rockets into southern Israel. It is largely financed and directed from Tehran. Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. In Iraq, groups such as Kataib Hezbollah and Harakat al-Nujaba act as Iran's auxiliaries. In Syria, the Pasdaran and allied militias have been instrumental in the survival of the Bashar al-Assad regime, another of Iran's partners. The Houthis in Yemen. Although the war in Yemen is mainly a local crisis, the Shiite Houthi rebels have been supported by Iran through the dispatch of arms, drones, and advisors. They have even claimed responsibility for attacks on Israel and its allies. Who supports Israel against Iran? The Hidden Coalition explained. Faced with this axis, Israel enjoys powerful support, albeit more formal than Iran's informal network. The United States. A strategic partner since the 1960s, Washington provides Israel with over $3.8 billion in annual military aid, as well as joint development of defense systems such as the Iron Dome. The United States has supported Israel during recent tensions with Iran, including through coordinated strikes and shared intelligence. Some European countries, although critical of Israeli policy in the West Bank and Gaza, countries such as Germany, France, and the UK cooperate with Israel on diplomatic and security issues, especially in the fight against terrorism and nuclear proliferation. The Gulf states. One of the major turning points was the signing of the Abraham Accords in 2020 between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and, more discreetly, Saudi Arabia. Although Riyadh has not yet officially signed, security cooperation exists behind the scenes. These countries see Iran as a common regional threat and are drawing closer to Israel as a pragmatic counterweight. In the next chapter, we'll discover the underlying reasons for this rivalry: ideology, security, nuclear power, and proxy warfare. Motivations that explain why this conflict seems endless. Why Israel and Iran are enemies, the real reasons behind the conflict. Israel versus Iran, a war of ideology and survival. Since 1979, Iran's opposition to Israel has not been simply political or military. It is ideological, almost theological. For Iran's leaders, the State of Israel represents a historical injustice, a vestige of Western colonialism, and an illegitimate entity occupying Palestinian land. This is why Iran does not recognize the existence of Israel, a position it is today the only state to officially maintain. As soon as he came to power, Ayatollah Khomeini enshrined the need to fight Israel in the regime's doctrine. This line has been maintained and even strengthened by his successor, Ali Khamenei. The Supreme Guide regularly refers to Israel as a cancerous tumor and publicly calls for its dismantling. This radical rhetoric is not purely verbal. It is accompanied by concrete support for anti-Israeli armed groups throughout the region. On the other hand, Israel perceives this hostility as an existential threat. A country of 9 million inhabitants, surrounded by sometimes hostile states, cannot ignore calls for its destruction from a militarily powerful and technologically advanced country of 85 million inhabitants. Israel's security doctrine is therefore based on a fundamental principle: preventing the Iranian threat before it gets out of hand. In Tel Aviv's view, this is what justifies preemptive strikes against Iranian infrastructures or the bases of its allies. This ideological and security-based confrontation fuels a permanent climate of war, where each side feels justified in striking at the other in the name of its own survival. The nuclear threat. Why Israel fears an Iranian atomic bomb. One of the central issues in the conflict is Iran's nuclear program. Officially, Tehran claims that its activities are civil and peaceful, aimed at producing energy and medical isotopes. However, since the early 2000s, there has been considerable evidence, notably from Western and Israeli intelligence services, that Iran has sought to develop a nuclear military capability. Israel considers an atomic-armed Iran to be an absolute red line. Not only would it jeopardize its own security, but it could also trigger a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, pushing countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey to follow suit. This is why Israel has been waging a secret war against Iran's nuclear program for over 20 years. This war takes several forms. Cyberattacks, such as the 2010 attack on the Natanz site using the Stuxnet virus, developed by Israel with the help of the USA, according to several sources. Targeted assassinations, including that of scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, presented as the father of Iran's military nuclear program, killed in 2020 in an operation attributed to Mossad. Plant sabotage, mysterious explosions, fires, and drone attacks on sensitive sites. In return, Iran resumed uranium enrichment at levels increasingly close to the military threshold. Despite the international agreement signed in 2015, JCPOA, which limited Iran's nuclear capabilities in exchange for the lifting of sanctions, tensions have never really disappeared. Since the withdrawal of the United States from this agreement in 2018 under Donald Trump, and the failure of attempts to revive it, the situation has become tense once again. Today, Iran would have sufficient quantities of enriched uranium to build a bomb in a few months, if it decided to do so. It's a race against time for both sides. An Iranian nuclear bomb would radically alter the strategic balance in the region. And for Israel, letting that happen is out of the question. The Proxy War: How Iran and Israel Fight Without Direct Combat. What makes the Israel-Iran conflict particularly complex is that it does not take the form of a conventional war. The two states have never faced each other directly on the battlefield, yet they have been at war for years, through intermediary actors. This phenomenon is called a proxy conflict. Iran supports armed groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, or Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq that attack Israel or its interests. In return, Israel retaliates with targeted strikes, mainly outside its territory. Here are a few recent examples. In Syria, Israel has carried out several hundred airstrikes since 2017 against weapons depots, convoys, or bases used by the Iranians or their allies. In Lebanon, tensions remain high with Hezbollah, which has an arsenal estimated at over 100,000 rockets aimed at Israel. In Gaza, salvos of rockets from Hamas or Islamic Jihad regularly trigger conflicts lasting several days with Israel, resulting in dozens or even hundreds of deaths. War is also being waged in cyberspace. The two countries are engaged in reciprocal cyberattacks. Israel has targeted Iranian electricity, oil, and nuclear infrastructures, while Iran is accused of attacking Israeli computer systems, hospitals, and banks. Finally, the war is also a narrative one. Each side is waging a media and disinformation battle on social networks, in the international media, and even via influence campaigns on the diasporas. The result is a fragmented, asymmetrical but constant war, a war without declaration, but with very real consequences. In the next chapter, we'll explore the invisible forces behind this conflict, the great powers like the USA, Russia, and China, and their hidden interests. Why do they support Israel or Iran? What is really at stake behind the scenes? Global powers behind the Iran-Israel conflict. Who's pulling the strings? Why the US and Europe back Israel against Iran? The US-Israel alliance, military support, and strategic interests. Since the 1960s, the United States has been Israel's most powerful strategic ally. This support transcends changes of administration, whether Democrat or Republican. It manifests itself in many ways: massive military support. Every year, Washington provides Israel with $3.8 billion in military aid, in addition to technological cooperation on defense systems such as the famous Iron Dome, capable of intercepting rockets in flight. Diplomatic veto at the UN. The United States regularly uses its veto power at the UN Security Council to block resolutions critical of Israel, particularly concerning settlements or military intervention. Security coordination. The two countries exchange high-value intelligence, notably on Iran's nuclear and ballistic activities. There are many reasons for this support: political and cultural affinities, the weight of the pro-Israel lobby in the United States, but also a shared vision of the Iranian threat. For Washington, Israel is an outpost of Western interests in the Middle East. Europe and Israel, strategic partners with diverging views. The European Union remains a diplomatic partner of Israel, although it adopts a more critical stance. Several countries, such as Germany, the Czech Republic, and Hungary, maintain strong support for Israel, particularly in terms of defense and historical memory. Others, such as France and Belgium, support Israel's security policy, but regularly denounce its policies towards the Palestinians, particularly the expansion of settlements and military operations in Gaza. On Iran, Europe has long played a mediating role, notably in the 2015 nuclear deal, JCPOA, but remains generally suspicious of Iran's regional ambitions. Arab states and Israel. How Iran changed the game. Since 2020, the Abraham Accords have ushered in a new era of diplomatic relations between Israel and several Gulf Arab monarchies, including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. These alliances, previously unimaginable, are mainly motivated by a shared fear of Iran. Even Saudi Arabia, long opposed to Israel, now maintains discreet security relations with the Hebrew state. Riyadh sees Israel as a useful partner in countering Iranian influence, particularly after drone attacks on its oil installations in 2019 attributed to pro-Iranian militias. These rapprochements are part of a profound regional realignment, where Sunni Shiite and pro-American Prussian lines are redrawing old traditional alliances. Who supports Iran and why? The other side of the conflict. Russia and China's hidden role in the Iran-Israel crisis. Unlike Western countries, Russia and China have never broken off relations with Iran, even at the height of international sanctions. Russia is a key military ally of Iran in Syria, where the two countries have jointly supported Bashar al-Assad's regime. Moscow also sells sophisticated weapons to Iran, such as S-300 missiles, and has defended Tehran on several occasions at the UN Security Council. China, for its part, is a strategic economic partner. In 2021, it signed a 25-year cooperation agreement with Iran, including massive investments in energy, infrastructure, and cybersecurity. Beijing also imports Iranian oil, often circumventing US sanctions. For these two powers, supporting Iran enables them to counter US influence in the Middle East, while securing their own energy supplies and geopolitical positions. Iran's armed proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and more. As mentioned in previous chapters, Iran relies on non-state actors to extend its influence. Hezbollah, Lebanon. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, Palestine. Shiite militias in Iraq, Kataib Hezbollah, Badr, etc. Shiite militias in Syria, Liwa Fatemiyun. Houthis in Yemen. These groups play an essential role. They enable Iran to pursue an offensive policy against Israel without directly exposing itself to all-out war. In return, these groups benefit from considerable financial, logistical, and military support. Why Iran and Israel have so many allies, power, oil, and ideology. Geopolitical reasons. The Middle East is a strategic region for its energy resources, trade routes, and diplomatic weight. Powers are positioning themselves to defend their interests. The United States supports Israel to maintain a reliable bridgehead against its rivals, Russia, China, Iran. Russia and China are supporting Iran to assert an alternative to the Western order, while securing their alliances in Asia and the Middle East. Ideological reasons. Some of our supporters have opposing worldviews. The Iran-Hezbollah-Hamas axis is based on an ideology of resistance to the West, support for the Palestinian cause, and rejection of Israel. The Israel-United States-Saudi Arabia axis, more discreet but real, is organized around a desire to maintain the existing regional order, with a rejection of Iran's Islamic Revolution. Economic reasons. Oil is at the heart of the balance of power. Iran, rich in hydrocarbons, seeks to monetize its oil despite the sanctions. Its Asian partners find it a cheap source of supply. Arms sales, infrastructure construction, and cross-investments between China, Russia, Iran, and the Gulf states also form a map of economic interests that structures alliances. In the next chapter, we'll see why the year 2025 marks an unprecedented rise in tensions, with recent events raising fears of direct confrontation. We will analyze the concrete triggers and the current diplomatic impasse. Why 2025 could be the year Israel and Iran go to war. What triggered the 2025 Israel-Iran crisis? Explained. Since the beginning of 2024, several events have brought the Israeli-Iranian conflict to a new level of seriousness. While for decades the confrontation was indirect, the year 2025 marks a turning point, with attacks becoming more frequent, more targeted, and, above all, more assertive. Inside Israel's secret military strikes on Iran. Israel has stepped up its clandestine operations and direct military strikes against Iran and its allies. Several attacks have been confirmed or attributed to Israel. Mysterious explosions hit Iranian military complexes and nuclear sites, such as Isfahan and Natanz. Targeted assassinations have been carried out on Revolutionary Guards officers in charge of the ballistics program or supporting armed groups. In Syria, Israel carried out unprecedented air raids on Iranian arms depots and convoys near Damascus, sometimes just a few kilometers from the Iraqi border. These strikes are aimed at slowing down Iranian military development and disrupting the logistics of the axis of resistance, but they have also increased Tehran's sense of vulnerability. Iran strikes back. What it means for the region. For the first time in decades, Iran retaliated head-on. In April 2024, an Iranian explosive drone crashed into a military site in the Israeli Negev, claimed indirectly via an Iraqi Shiite militia. But it was above all in January 2025 that a landmark event raised tensions to a new level. After the elimination of an Iranian general on Syrian soil, Iran launched a salvo of long-range ballistic missiles towards Israeli military bases in the north of the country. The attack was partially intercepted by Israel's anti-missile system, but it was Iran's first direct military attack against Israel since the 1979 revolution. This crossing of a tactical threshold is highly symbolic. It indicates that Iran is no longer content to act through its allies, but is ready to take on open attacks, even at the risk of escalation. Iran's proxy network is crumbling. Here's why it matters. At the same time, Iran's military relays are encountering difficulties. Hezbollah, in political crisis in Lebanon and economically weakened, seems more cautious than before. In Syria, the regular army is exhausted, and pro-Iranian militias are regular targets of Israeli strikes. In Iraq, armed Shiite groups are weakened by internal divisions and popular pressure. This loss of capacity on the part of intermediary players is pushing Tehran to intervene more directly, exposing its forces even more, and thus multiplying the risks of a major confrontation. Why diplomacy has failed between Israel and Iran. The collapse of the Iran nuclear deal. What comes next? One of the few levers for de-escalation between Iran and the West was the Iran nuclear deal, JCPOA. But since the withdrawal of the United States in 2018, efforts to revive it have failed. In 2023, talks in Vienna were suspended after Iran demanded the total lifting of sanctions without sufficient quid pro quo. In return, it continued to enrich uranium to a level above 60%, a few weeks away from military capability. The IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, warned, but its inspectors were limited in their access to sensitive sites. As a result, dialogue is now at a standstill. Neither Washington, Brussels, nor Tehran seem ready to make the necessary concessions. Iran, isolated, is turning to Russia and China, while Israel is stepping up pressure to force international and even military action. why no one can stop the Israel-Iran war anymore. Until recently, certain countries acted as mediators between Israel and Iran: Oman, Qatar, Switzerland, and even France. But as positions have become more radical, these attempts are running out of steam. Today, there is no direct diplomatic channel between Jerusalem and Tehran. Messages pass through hostile intermediaries, and misunderstandings multiply. In this context, every incident can be misinterpreted, every strike can trigger a riposte, and the spiral can accelerate without warning. In the next chapter, we'll look at the concrete risks today: all-out war, destabilization of the Middle East, regional economic collapse, and direct consequences for civilian populations. An explosive situation that could affect the whole world. What happens if Israel and Iran go to war? Full risk breakdown. Are we headed for a full-scale Israel-Iran war? The first risk is the one everyone fears: an all-out war between Israel and Iran. So far, the conflict has taken the form of limited strikes, targeted assassinations, cyberattacks, or indirect confrontations. But since the direct Iranian strikes of early 2025, a red line seems to have been crossed. If a new attack results in large numbers of Israeli deaths, Israel could retaliate en masse, targeting vital infrastructure in Iran. In return, Tehran could mobilize its regional allies, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon or Shiite militias in Iraq, to launch a coordinated offensive. This military escalation could quickly get out of hand. Strikes on Iranian nuclear or military sites, with the risk of contamination or flashover. Launch of long-range ballistic missiles towards Israel, with or without chemical warheads. U.S. intervention in support of Israel, which would turn the conflict into a regional or even international war. At this stage, no army is really seeking direct confrontation, but the logic of escalation could make such a war inevitable if a major event occurs. How the Israel-Iran conflict could destabilize the entire Middle East. A direct conflict between Israel and Iran would send shockwaves throughout the region. In Lebanon, Hezbollah, armed with tens of thousands of rockets, could open a northern front against Israel, triggering reciprocal bombardments and massive destruction. In Syria, already fragmented by 12 years of civil war, a new wave of Israeli strikes against Iranian positions could shatter the country's fragile balance. In Iraq, pro-Iranian militias are said to be targeting American bases, with the risk of the conflict spreading to the American army. In the Persian Gulf, the Straits of Hormuz, through which almost a third of the world's oil transits, would become high-risk zones, with attacks on ships, blockades, and sabotage. In other words, the whole of the Middle East could become a shattered battlefield, with every country drawn, willingly or unwillingly, into the spiral of violence. How war between Israel and Iran could trigger a global economic crisis. The Israel-Iran conflict goes beyond the military sphere. Its economic repercussions could be planetary. Oil on the front line. One of the first impacts would be a sharp rise in oil prices. Iran controls or threatens several strategic points in world oil traffic. The Strait of Hormuz, between Iran and Oman. Oil terminals in Iraq and Kuwait. Pipelines linking the Gulf to the Mediterranean. If Iran closes these routes or attacks tankers, oil prices could double in a matter of days, as they did in 1973 or 1990. This would lead to global inflation, with rising prices for petrol, transport, food, and raw materials. Financial market instability. The prospect of a regional war between great powers would also disrupt stock markets, which hate uncertainty, currencies with a flight to the dollar or gold, foreign investment, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa. Such instability could exacerbate the economic fragilities already present in the wake of the pandemic, the conflicts in Ukraine, and tensions with China. The human cost, how civilians will suffer if war breaks out. As always in modern conflicts, civilians are the first to be affected. The humanitarian consequences would be considerable on both sides. In Israel, risk of missile strikes on major cities, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem. Massive use of shelters, evacuation of sensitive areas, post-traumatic stress, constant fear, interruption of daily life. In Iran, risk of targeted bombing of strategic infrastructures with possible collateral damage, authoritarian regime reaction, internal repression, internet blackouts and curfews. In neighboring countries, thousands of refugees could flee combat zones, southern Lebanon, Syria, Iraq. Humanitarian crisis in the camps or at the borders, overworked NGOs, overwhelmed hospitals, breakdown of the food chain in some areas. These impacts would be long-lasting. Even a short war could devastate an entire generation, leaving countries in ruins and exacerbating hatred between communities. In the next chapter, we'll see why this conflict concerns us all, even outside the Middle East. We'll talk about the global stakes, the danger of misinformation, and the urgent need for strong diplomacy. Why the Israel-Iran conflict matters to the whole world. This is not just a regional war, the global impact of Iran versus Israel. It's tempting to think that the confrontation between Israel and Iran is a Middle East affair, that it's a distant confrontation between two countries that have nothing in common. But the reality is very different. This conflict has a direct impact on global stability. Collective security is at stake. If war breaks out, it is likely to involve major powers such as the United States, Russia, and NATO members. International military bases could be attacked. The global geopolitical order would be turned upside down. The global economy is also under threat. Oil, gas, shipping, financial markets, they're all interconnected. An attack in the Persian Gulf, rising tensions in Lebanon, or a military escalation in Gaza can have knock-on effects on energy prices, inflation, and even the global food supply. And politically, the crisis is fueling a climate of polarization and instability. It reinforces extremes, justifies mass surveillance, and weakens international cooperation efforts. This is not just a conflict of arms, it is also a conflict of influence, information, and values. How to avoid being manipulated during the Israel-Iran crisis. In a world saturated with information, disinformation has become a weapon in its own right. Social networks are awash with videos taken out of context, viral rumors, fabricated images, and manipulated analyses. Each side in the Israeli-Iranian conflict wages a war of image and emotion. Narratives are constructed to justify strikes, minimize civilian casualties, and demonize the enemy. And algorithms amplify what shocks, divides, and radicalizes. That's why it's crucial, now more than ever, to learn to distinguish truth from falsehood, to cross-reference sources, and to take a step back. Understanding this conflict means refusing to be manipulated. It means choosing lucidity over hatred. And it also means recognizing that the suffering of a civilian, whether Israeli, Iranian, Lebanese, or Palestinian, is always a tragedy. The only way out: peace, diplomacy, and global responsibility. There's nothing inevitable about this conflict. War is never the only option. There are alternatives: negotiation, international pressure, mediation, targeted sanctions, and security guarantees. These levers have already worked in the past. The Iran nuclear deal, the ceasefire in Lebanon, indirect channels of discussion via third countries. But for these options to be possible, we need strong political will, mobilized public opinion, and a coherent international community. The younger generations have a major role to play. By understanding what is at stake, by informing themselves critically, by rejecting simplistic or hateful discourse, they can influence the future. Because what is at stake in the Middle East goes beyond borders. it is also a battle for international law, justice, and human dignity.
Thanks for watching. If this analysis helped you make sense of the Israel-Iran crisis, drop a like, subscribe to the International Explainer, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next episodes on digital disinformation, diplomacy efforts in Geneva, or emerging global ramifications. Leave your thoughts in the comments. What crisis point are you most worried about? And what should the world next? See you next time.